So we're back with Dr. B. Welcome back to Two Docs Talk, Dr. B.
Thank you.
We're so glad to have you, and we loved your discussion about stress, and the listeners loved it. We had so many positive comments. We're so glad you could come back for part two, and we're going to talk about today about stress management. And just for the listeners, if you haven't listened to part one, highly recommend go back to episode one of this series, where we'll define a lot of the concepts, and it'll be a lot easier to listen to part two once you listen to part one, because we're just going to dive right into some of the more advanced stress management concepts. And I'll let Abbas kick it off with the first question.
It's great to have you, Sheila. I enjoyed the last episode so much, and so as I sent it to many colleagues and friends, and they really enjoyed it very much. I think it's so positive. What I like about your stress management, that you combine it with pillars of lifestyle medicine, and that's, I think, I have not seen, at least I'm not aware of, when you look at the literature or teaching from psychology, from behavioral, the combination of this is, I think, is the key element for longevity and daily type quality of lives. So can you elaborate on some of this pillar of life and how we can combine it with stress management?
I think about the pillars of lifestyle medicine as being a Venn diagram, and they all work together. And at the center of that Venn diagram is our best self. And so we know that sleep, social connections, avoiding risky substances, stress management, physical activity, and nutrition are all good for us. But I think if we think about them in terms of how they intersect with each other and how they can help us be more resilient so that we can be our best self and we can handle whatever life brings at us, is a good way to think about them. So I think about the pillars of lifestyle medicine setting me up for success. So I'm much more likely to be able to handle the stressors of my daily life if I've set myself up for success with sleep, social connections, risk avoidance of risky substances, physical activity, and nutrition. So for instance, I think sleep is the number one thing, because when we don't sleep well, nothing goes well. And so really thinking about getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. And so in getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep at night, not just the hours, but keeping those hours regular. So the number one thing I talk about is having a regular bedtime and a regular sleep time. So we know that social jet lag, when we vary the time that we go to bed and that we wake up, that has a negative impact on our health. And so if we normally go to bed between 9 and 10 and wake up between 6 and 7 during the weekdays, and then on the weekends, we stay up until midnight, 1 a.m., and we think, well, I'm just going to sleep in and make up for it. It actually doesn't work that way. So we may still be getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep, but we have this social jet lag, and that actually has been associated with negative health markers. So it's important to, number one, get that 7 to 9 hours of sleep at night. Number two, keep your sleep time and wake time. Try to keep that within an hour. And then honor your body's circadian rhythm. We were designed to wake up when it's light, be active during the day, eat during the day, and then settle down in the evening, not eat late at night, and then have things dark at night, so then we can rest and we can get refreshing sleep. And so just honoring that and being able to, in the morning, wake up, get that sun early in the morning, exercise outside if we can, be active during the day, eat the majority of our food earlier in the day. And then as evening comes on, the sun goes down. We want the lights in our house to be down. We don't need to be looking at screens that are giving us all of this blue light and inhibiting our melatonin from being released in our brain. So we want to have things dark at night. You can go into your settings on your phone and your computer, and you can change your blue light. So after 7 p.m., the blue light is filtered out of your computer or your phone. We can also shut those things down so that we're not stimulated at 8, 9 o'clock at night. So 8, 9 o'clock at night, that is not the time for me to be pulling out my computer, really diving into emails and getting heavy into work. Or even things like watching the news,
Exactly.
something that's going to, exactly, something that's going to get us all riled up. So we want to, in the evening, give ourselves the opportunity to do something relaxing and pleasurable. So, lying down, putting your feet up, enjoying a book, doing something that you find relaxing.
Go for a walk.
Yeah, go for a walk after dinner. Not a stimulating walk, but just a little evening stroll. It's that after dinner, you take an evening stroll. It's relaxing. You move your body. You actually feel better. And maybe you do a little stretching. You do something like that before bed. So just being able to set yourself up for success with sleep. So doing those things that are going to promote sleep in the evening. And then you know that when you promote good sleep, the next day you're going to feel better as well. And I think about this again, like this Venn diagram, because when we sleep well, number one, we're going to manage our stress better. So when they do studies and they look at people who are sleep deprived or who have at least 7 hours of sleep. And so they show each of these groups, sleep deprived and adequate sleep, pictures of faces. And some of the faces are clearly aggressive and some of the faces are just neutral faces. And so the people who are sleep deprived were much more likely to view neutral faces as being threatening than the people who had good sleep. So when we all have experienced this, where if we haven't slept well, something happens and we immediately go into this stress response, we feel threatened, even though on a day when we had adequate sleep, we would have just taken this in stride and managed it much better. Sleep also affects our energy. So if we didn't get good sleep, so we're more likely to see things as a threat. We're less likely to exercise, and we know exercise is good for us, decreases our stress response as well. And then we also are more likely to eat more calories and more sugar and fat. And so all of these things intersect. And so the other thing too is, and I think about then how it intersects with social interaction. Again,
and productivity also.
Exactly. Yeah. Productivity, everything. We're not at our best when we don't sleep well. And then we think about substances. I'm much more likely, if I didn't sleep well, I'm going to be pounding the caffeine during the day, which means then that next evening, I'm much more likely to say, oh, I'm so tired. I'm going to sit down and have a couple glasses of wine because I want to wind down before bed. But then it's just as counteractive or counterproductive. The first thing I think about in setting ourselves up for success in managing the stresses in our life is good sleep. So 7 to 9 hours, keeping that bedtime and wake time as consistent as possible, and knowing that when we sleep well, everything else starts to fall into place.
And there's some stuff that, maybe there's some stressors that we have in our life we cannot manage. But I think if you set it up with, good evening, as you mentioned, not eating late at night, little walk, stuff like that, at least these are, you can do something positive, and then I think then we can solve it, our daily stresses that we all have, manage it better, as you said.
Absolutely. If I think about it as, for instance, being a mom, if I slept well, that meant that I would get up in the morning in time to have my quiet meditation time. I'd get my exercise in. I'd have my little quiet time so that I was fully prepared. My energy battery was charged. And I felt like I was ready to take anything on. So whoever came downstairs, if somebody came downstairs and they may not have woken up on the right side of the bed, then they can come in and I'm going to be able to be my best self for whoever it is that comes into the kitchen, as opposed to if both of us are sleep deprived.
Confrontation.
Oh, yeah. You say something, set somebody off, and then all of a sudden it's like, wow, we need to start all over. So yeah, sleep definitely helps put us in a position that we can be our best self.
Do you have any advice for shift workers, especially like night shift workers?
That's really, really tough. And if you look at, so a lot of the studies that are done on the detrimental effects of sleep deprivation are done on shift workers. And so I would say trying to keep things as consistent as possible. And so for shift workers, what they have to do is they need to be able to come home whenever they come home and make their situation as dark and cool as possible. So when you get home, you need to be able to be in a room that has light filtering or light blocking curtains. So make that room as dark as possible, keep it as cool as possible. And then you come home and you have to create your environment where you can then go to sleep. And then when you awaken, then again, being able to get outside, get some sunshine, get some activity, be awake. And then sometimes you can also try to take a little bit of a nap sometime during the day before you're going to start your shift. That way you can at least make up for a little bit of that sleep deprivation or that sleep deficit. And then trying to time, again, your meals before you're ready to go to bed. So that way, when you're at work, you're not eating something heavy before you're going to go home and try to go to sleep.
Yeah, we see a lot of the nurses that come, talk to them. They just come before they go sleep. They go have big, their sort of breakfast, and they go there and they all have reflux. I said, well, once you have reflux, then you cannot sleep, no matter what time it is. That's by itself subconsciously keep you awake and you're exhausted and you're tired. So I think the meal planning for them is so, so important. And I see quite a few of our own nurses that, they're always exhausted, and then or during the night, they drink so much coffee to stay awake, and they're so hungry. They stop to get, whatever things there. Yeah, that's a very tough thing. I mean, even I'm sure all of us through our residency happens, before 5 o'clock in the morning, you feel like you're exhausted. You feel like, you're just, there's no energy left in you. Yeah, that's, I think, so big among, particularly hospital workers as well as other shift workers. That was great question, Rob. How about exercise? With sleep, of course, important. Then I think exercise, and we had some conversation how much to do it, how to do it, and of course varies person to person. What's your thoughts on that and stress?
So I think exercise, if there's a magic pill, exercise is the magic pill. So exercise helps with, again, pretty much everything in our body, both physical and mental health. So it obviously improves our cardiovascular endurance, muscle strength. It improves energy, mood, cognitive function. So we can, if you think about learning and locomotion, it goes together. How we evolved, we're generally on the move, and we're learning and moving at the same time, because we're learning where the food is, and learning where the shelter is, and learning where other potential mates are. And so activity and learning go hand in hand. And we know that it helps just with so many things. There was also a study that was done looking at people who were really stressed. And we know that chronic stress has an effect on our telomeres, which is, part of the aging process. And so those with high perceived stress who exercised, that exercise kind of buffered the effect when it came to the negative effect of stress on their telomeres. So it's kind of it's a buffer for stress, and how much exercise we need. So it's recommended that we get at least 150 minutes a week of moderate intensity exercise. And moderate intensity exercise is where we're working hard enough that we're working up a sweat, and we're able to carry on a conversation, but not necessarily break out to a tune. So unless you're a Broadway singer and you can sing and dance at the same time. So, but 150 minutes a week of working hard enough that you can have a conversation but can't sing. If you don't have 150 minutes, then doing 75 minutes of more vigorous activity. And vigorous activity would be something where you are working hard enough that you can say a few words, but you're not going to carry on a full conversation. And then, of course, trying to do something that includes strength, balance. So I think multi-component exercise. So that can be, working out with a trainer, working out on your own, doing some sort of resistance training. I think Pilates and Tai Chi and yoga are all great things, because those are also moving meditations, really, because we're moving with our breath in each of those activities. So there's generally, as you inhale, there's a movement. As you exhale, there's a movement. And it's a moving meditation. So it's good for our brain and good for our body.
Yeah, I so agree. For me, anytime working hard or anything like that, when I go, I play tennis for a long time, squash now, because just when I go there, it's just, an hour and a half, this is like a complete meditation, don't forget about the rest of what my stresses is. And my wife knows it. Sometimes when I come here, says, I think you need to go play some game. So when I go there, I come back, I'm a whole new person. It's not only exercise, it's just a cleansing of the mind. And just for me, it's meditation. Just staring at that little ball for an hour to 2 hours, completely just reset my mind, reset my whole thing.
Yeah, because you're fully engaged in the moment.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And we had the program for HIT. Rob, do you want that's for quick data?
Yeah, so a shout out to James Hilliard. So that episode will air episode 28, just before this episode, the one we're recording currently, and that talks about a unique way to exercise with high intensity training. So it's strength training and also sprint training. There's different ways to do HIT exercise. And encourage everyone to listen to that if you're interested in a way to potentially shorten the time of the exercise, but get the muscular and the cardiovascular benefits. And we talk about the VO2 max, and which is the maximum rate of oxygen consumption during exercise, which is linked to longevity, and also muscle strength and mass is linked to longevity as well. So there's various ways to do exercise, but that's a unique one that we're going to feature on episode 28. So that'll be coming up here in about a week. We'll release that from the time that this episode is recorded. So.
A different stroke for different. So you got to do that wherever you are, with home, town, or anywhere. I think different, as long as you just keep moving. I think that's the key things.
And something that's enjoyable. It needs to be fun. Right. Because we're not going to keep things up if it's not fun. So it needs to be fun. And if you can do it with other people, I think that's a plus. And anything where you're so engaged in that moment that you just lose track of time, and you do all of your problems, everything else just kind of falls away. So, and even things like horseback riding. So when you're riding a horse, you are not thinking about anything except riding that horse. Or when you're playing racquetball, you're not thinking about anything except playing racquetball. Pickleball is another good example. And it's such a fun way to get some exercise. You're with people, you're having a good time, and you are just focused on right here and right now. And there's a lot to be said about being mindful to the present moment.
And the next one is, I believe, goes with that, the same as social, the connection, and I think that's so huge. And I think we have a thing back home called Didubaz Did. It means go visit and they come back to visit you. So it's a very big part of our culture that at least you got to go visit, and you don't eat meal alone, and if you don't just invite somebody there. So I think that's so huge in Asia. And unfortunately, as big cities we develop, I have many friends that they're New York, LA, they're very lonely. They just sometimes come back here to see us, because even there's millions of people, they feel like isolated. I think that's a key thing. So what do you thought of that?
Yes. So we know that low social support increases our risk for chronic disease. And people who don't have adequate social support, they have a heightened stress reactivity. And so when they do studies and they look at people and they put them in a stressful situation, either with a friend present or without a friend present, and they can measure their subjective anxiety and their objective cortisol level, the people who have a friend present still have a stress response. And so they still have some anxiety and they still have a rise in their cortisol, but it's buffered a little bit. And the people who don't have a friend present, they have more anxiety and they have higher rise in their cortisol levels. So they have a greater stress response, a higher heightened stress response. And then you see that the people who have a friend, they recover quickly. So they have a stress response, but they recover quickly and they come back to baseline. Whereas the people who didn't have a friend, 70 minutes later, their cortisol levels were as high as the other people were at their peak. And so we know that having supportive people in our lives buffers our stress response. We're still going to have stressors in our life. We're still going to respond to them, but it's not going to be as heightened, as exaggerated, and we're going to recover more quickly. And if you think about oxytocin is a hormone released when we give birth, with breastfeeding, and then with human-human interactions, and then in some human-animal interactions even. And it enhances attachment and trust and empathy, and it modulates amygdala tone and fear. So the amygdala, that area of our brain that takes in information all the time and decides, is this a threat or is this not a threat? Do I need to fire up the sympathetic nervous system and fight or flight? Or do I stand down and we can still parasympathetic, rest, digest, reproduce, and grow? So oxytocin modulates that. So it decreases our fear and anxiety. And so we have to be able to take advantage of that. And I just keep going back to how we're intended to be. And we're intended to be in a social group. We are not intended to be alone. And if you look at all of the indicators of that isolation brings on of poor health, cognitive function, immune function, metabolic, cardiovascular, all of these things, we're intended to be with people who are supportive. And you talked about like visiting somebody and having them visit you. And I think it's important that we remember that pro-social behavior actually is really important too. And so that pro-social behavior, doing something for somebody else, and then knowing that they're going to be there for you. And one of the things we do in the SMART class is we really look at who we have in our emotional circles. Who do we have that provides that unconditional love and support? Who do we have that gives us that just tangible support? Like I always think about who's going to give me my ride to and from my colonoscopy. Those things that you just, I need help. Can somebody help me here?
And depend on them.
Yeah, you can depend on them. You can call them and they're going to help you out. And that you want them to call you so that you can be there for them. So that reciprocity. And then, so just thinking about who's in your circle, who do you have fun with? Who do you call when you just want to, let's go have fun. Let's go have a good time. Let's do something together. So trying to think about those people in your life who provide different types of support. And you think about also people at work give you that affirmational support where you feel needed and valued. And so there's all types of support that we need.
And of course, as they say, that's choose your friends wisely. And they say, if you want to know somebody, just look at their friends, that you know who that person is. So it's important to we go to an environment that is positive and is not negative, whether something bar or gambling places. Those are, I think, more negative stressors than positive.
And that brings up a good point too, that when we're wanting to make changes in our life and take on better habits and better behaviors, we need to surround ourselves by people who are wanting to make those same changes. And because there's this social contagion theory that we become like the people that we spend the most time with. Like you said, if you want to know who somebody is, look at their friends. And so if we are wanting to be more active and take care of ourselves and do these things, then we need to make sure that we're surrounding ourselves with people who share those values.
Exactly. And also during the stress time, on tough time, I was in Africa. It was very interesting. We were going to see some animals. And our friend says, do you know why zebras, they have these lines? It says, no. It says during the stress, they get together. And when they get together, it becomes a big illusion for anybody who wants to attack them. They go back. So just by being a family and they look like each other, they look as an individual, they can be attacked or be, preyed on. But once they're together, they seldom the animals will attack them because they look, it's just being together as not for us, for animals, for behavior as well as the protective things to do during the tough time.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I was going to comment about the stress in oncology patients and in our cancer patients, especially just patients who have supportive family and friends just do better. And that's something that is such since I've started practicing about 20 years ago, just to see that, and it's just so evident. And so when patients don't have social support, we try to get them plugged into social workers or support groups or anything really just to help them to have that engagement. So that's something that we've observed and is so key in that, in that acute setting of illness. And yeah, we need support even more during that time. And it's so evident.
And that will take us to the next topic of toxic and substance abuse. And sometimes a lot of people that they're lonely, they keep drinking, or whether it's excess of coffee, alcohol, other things. So let's talk about the toxics as a pillar of longevity.
Trying to avoid risky substances, and that can take many forms. So sometimes we think, people use tobacco or alcohol as a way to manage their stress. And of course, it can make us feel better in the short term, but then in the long term, it's counterproductive, because then we get caught in a habit loop, and that craving just causes more internal distress for us. So just recognizing that, and of course, reaching out for help. So there's a lot of ways to reach out for help with nicotine, tobacco. The 1-800-QUIT-NOW is a great number to call for tobacco use. And then alcohol, again, reaching out, asking for help. There's a lot of different things we can do. And then I think for most of us, just recognizing and becoming more mindful about our use of whatever it is. So I think that, alcohol is something that can definitely be enjoyed, and can be enjoyed in the context of other people. So you go out, you have a good meal, you have a nice glass of wine, or you enjoy a cocktail at a party. That can be something that's very nice and fun. But I think just to be mindful about it, okay, when I come home and I've had a long day at work, do I need to immediately pour that glass of wine? Is there something else I can do? And just thinking about setting some boundaries there. We're saying, okay, I'm going to enjoy alcohol in the setting of other people when I am in a good mood, and alcohol is going to enhance my enjoyment of this. But trying to be mindful and not have alcohol when I've come home and I'm by myself and I'm using alcohol to distract myself from the day, or remove myself from thoughts that I don't want to deal with, or just check out completely. So I think being mindful about that, and recognizing there is harm in alcohol. So for men, 15 drinks or more a week is considered harm. For women, 8 drinks or more a week is considered harm. So trying to keep it under that, and again, just being mindful about it, and you don't have to be all or none, but committing to enjoying things in life in the right setting and in moderation.
There's an old Persian book that I have read several times. There's a saying that says, my first drink will take anxiety from my day work. Second drink make me romantic and poetic. Third drink tell me the truth. And after the fourth, I regret anything I say or I do. So you have to limit it to 1 or 2. And not every time. Unfortunately, since COVID, we see so much more alcoholic-related disease, and particularly we see it more number in female and during the COVID, and I think being loneliness and self-medication and medicating themselves, and then of course you combine that with heavy dinner meals, and of course fatty liver and all of that, becomes a very sad thing to see these days. That is becoming a combination of those things. So I think I tell people they have to give every other day off to cleanse the liver, and just instead of that have non-caffeinated tea or go for a walk or something like that, because then the body cravings, and as you mentioned before, it interferes with your sleep, and then you wake up, you cannot get a good night's sleep. So unfortunately today is many other substances, abuse of marijuana in here, as it's become legalized, that everybody thinks that is because it's legal is go for it, and then we see gastroparesis, nausea, vomiting, and unfortunately there's many other toxins today. To people try to self treat themselves with all this narcotic and other things as well.
Substances can interfere with all the other areas of lifestyle medicine. So if I have, I know for certain, if I have 2 glasses of red wine, I'm not going to sleep well. And then the next morning, I'm going to wake up, my joints are going to hurt. I'm not going to feel like exercising. I'm, all of these things. And then it I think the pillars of lifestyle medicine, when we are engaging in good, healthy behaviors, they build on each other. And so we have this upward spiral to our best self. But the same pillars, if we're not engaging in good, healthy behaviors, they affect each other, and we have this downward spiral to my not best self. And I think alcohol is one of those things that, like we said, can definitely be enjoyed, but when it's not used appropriately, can really lead to a downhill spiral.
What about caffeine? I'd love to hear your take on that substance.
Yeah. So caffeine, we all metabolize caffeine differently. And so some of us are fast metabolizers, some of us are slow metabolizers. And if you are a fast metabolizer of caffeine, then it may not affect you so much. But if you're a slow metabolizer of caffeine, then caffeine can definitely interfere with sleep at night. And so just knowing how does caffeine affect me, being aware of that, and then trying to limit caffeine, especially later in the day, afternoon, so it doesn't interfere with sleep. I've yet to see a study that shows that caffeine in and of itself is a terrible thing. In fact, there's a lot of beneficial phytochemicals in coffee and tea, like green tea. And so I love my own caffeine. I have a nice cup of coffee every morning. In fact, I love to meditate with my cup of coffee, because to me, it's something that I savor, I enjoy. And in fact, so when I first started my meditation practice, the thought of sitting down for 5 minutes a day and, quote, not accomplishing anything for 5 minutes was just unheard of, because I got up very early. I got my workout in, and then I had my cup of coffee. And generally that was the first thing I wanted to do, turn on the coffee. But then I realized that as I'm drinking my coffee, I was unloading the dishwasher, I was starting to load laundry, I was packing lunches, I was going through email, and I would slurp down a couple cups of coffee in the morning as I'm doing 10 other things and not enjoy any of it. And so I actually started my meditation practice by saying, okay, I am going to sit down with my cup of coffee, and I am going to savor this cup of coffee, and I'm going to write my gratitudes, and I'm going to meditate for 2 minutes. And that's how I started my meditation practice. And so it is still my routine that I sit in my chair, I savor my cup of coffee, and I do my whole morning routine. And I start my day with intention, which includes caffeine, which honestly, I think coffee is to be savored. It's one of my favorite beverages.
Same here.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think it is with this caffeinated beverages. I mean, being around the world and thing. I think 1 to 2 cup of coffee, black. I think is beneficial to you. It's a lot of them today is what adds to that, all the sugar and all the other things, and then half-life of caffeine, regardless, is about 6 to 8 hours. And I think if you drink after 2 p.m., that I think interferes with your sleep. So, and initially, actually, as you said, caffeine meditating, many studies show, as you know, they do nappuccinos now, the initial caffeine, the first half an hour, actually calms you down. Relaxes is the consequence of that. And sometimes people with ADHD, they tell them about drinking the morning coffee so you can concentrate better. So I think as everything else is dose effect. 1 to 2 cup of coffee below, before noon or before there, I think is okay. But I think once after dinner, you can have a cup of coffee and a cocktail and all that. That I think will break down the pillars. I think you have to be aware of how you drink your coffee and how much you put in it, how much sugar and how much cream and all of those, mochas, and go to Starbucks, and those are, I think, look at the calories on those are just deadly. So no, I think everything. I think especially I myself, black coffee is a spiritual thing, as you said, is good in the morning, and I think just how much you use it and when you use it is the key thing.
Yeah. Once again, being mindful and just being able to ask yourself, so number one, do I want this? Am I enjoying this? Or am I just drinking it out of habit? And so with a lot of things, I think that initial, for instance, with my coffee in the morning, and I love and savor that first cup. If I were to have 3 more cups of coffee, I probably wouldn't even taste them.
Mm-hmm.
It would just be drinking them because it's just out of habit. And so being able to just be mindful and say, okay, do I really want this? And so, for instance, now I've gotten to the point where I have a small cup and I only fill it halfway full because I want hot coffee. I want good hot coffee. I don't want to drink cold coffee. And so if I have a big mug, then by the time I get to the bottom, it's cold. So just being mindful and enjoying what you want out of it. Yeah, black coffee and the coffees with all the cream and the sugar, it's not even coffee anymore.
Exactly.
It's just something else.
Expensive, and just the amount of sugar. Some of those just calculated. Those are,
Oh, like 40 grams of sugar in
all
some of
in one.
those.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
So, yeah.
so let's go to the next pillar, which is everybody wants to do first: the nutrition and diet. That's everybody's drill on them because it is controllable, but is not the top as we mentioned. But it is very, very important because again, we are human. Interaction is like a cup of coffee, visiting each other. That's the key things on how much you eat, what you do. So what's your thoughts on the diet and nutrition?
So I think, first of all, that food is to be enjoyed. And so being able to choose foods and make a meal that is delicious and sit down and enjoy that meal, it sets us up for success. What I think about with food, I try to keep it really simple. So number one, eat real food. If all we did as a society was cut out ultra processed food, we would be so much better off. So we feel better when we eat real food. So eating real food. Number two, sitting down and being mindful about it. So when we think about, stress and our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, when we are stressed and our sympathetic nervous system is fired up, we are not in a position for our body to digest and absorb what we're taking in. So being able to sit down to a meal and take a breath and express gratitude. And when we shift our awareness, we shift our physiology. And when we sit down and we take a few breaths and we put the phones away and we appreciate the food that is before us, then we are shifting over into a more parasympathetic dominant state where we're much more likely to digest and absorb what we're taking in. And so I think having real food, sitting down, being mindful about what we're eating and putting ourselves in a state to absorb and digest that food. And then, of course, focusing on a more plant-forward diet. And so trying to make 3/4 of our plate plant food means that then we're more likely to take in fiber and nutrients that we need. So we're going to be able to feel satisfied, like our taste buds are satisfied. We want something tasty. It needs to be delicious and we need to chew it. To me, liquid meals are not meals. So being able to chew and it's tasty and there's a good combination of texture and mouthfeel and flavor and everything complements each other. So at the end of the meal, I am satisfied, I'm satiated, my blood sugar is going to rise slowly and it's going to stay up. I'm not going to shoot up and then fall down. And that is setting myself up for success to be able to do what I want to do with my day. I'm not craving something more. I'm not hungry. I'm not feeling deprived or restricted. But I'm also not feeling sick in 2 hours because I just had some yucky food that's not going to sit well with me. So I just think of food as it's fuel. And it sets us up for success to do what we want to do in life, whether that's physical activity, mental activity, whatever it is that we need to do. It is fuel that allows us to be at our best.
And when you eat a good meal, then you don't snack. And I think snack is what kills us. If you have in the morning a good protein and good, fiber and stuff like that, then your sugar is continue to be with, parallel to your insulin instead of just these sugary things quickly, then have to chase it with another snack and another snack. And we see that in the hospital among physicians and among everybody else. They just have to do the coffee and the other snack. And I think those are more harmful to than having to sit down, and enjoy. And it's a part of interaction. We work hard for that meal. One of the key things, I'm a very foodie people and I travel around the world. And one of the key things when I want to share a meal with a local, stuff like that. And just the preparation, sitting and see the taste. And I think the food shows the culture. When you sit down with somebody that, but whether what they use and what's locally, what's they do. And most, of course, is for nutrition and as the ancient culture as you use it as a medicine for preventative disease and how much spice, what they do. So I think nutrition is the key thing. And I agree with you, about 75 to 80% should be plant-based. And then don't be scared of other food. I think when we interact with somebody, be flexitarian, just, be on a good diet when you're on sale. But if you go to a function, don't demand everybody serves you because that's what you want. It's a part of human interaction, part of being a sort of in a good society and be accepted in that society. And I think that's very, very important of when you eat and when you eat as well.
Allowing our bodies to do what they're meant to do. And we're meant to have more of our calories earlier in the day. And we're not intended to have these late night meals and snacks and then try to go to bed after we've just had a big meal. So just trying to think about eating earlier in the day, making our plates mostly plants, making our plates colorful. Again, thinking about setting ourselves up for success. We're going to feel better if we eat better. And I'm going to be able to manage whatever it is that I need to manage during the day if I've fueled myself appropriately.
And I tell my patient 90% of your calories should be between 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. Dinner should be just a little pastime or something simple so that you can enjoy gathering than having heavy dinner. So yeah. So I think that's culturally throughout the whole world. This is I think right now since World War II that we work all day long and become a huge dinner, and then we have all our blood flow go to our gut. We cannot do exercise. We just pass out on the couch and go to bed. And then we see that every day in all our practices, I'm sure.
Just curious about your take on fasting. Do you advocate that for your patients?
I usually try to say what works for you in your life. And I think because part of the thing too is meals are a time that you can come together as a family. And if the only time you can come together and eat as a family is at 6:30 at night, then I don't want to encourage somebody to be so restrictive where they're like, oh, nope, can't have family dinner because I'm in my time restricted feeding period and I can only eat between this period and this period. So I really try to discourage rigidity and restriction. So I try to encourage at least 12 hours of letting your body be in a fasting state, because that's pretty easy to achieve. So at least 12 hours. So that would be whatever, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., 8 p.m. to 8 a.m., whatever. And then if you can do more than that, great. So if you can try to have your dinner earlier, let's say 5 or 6, and then you can put off breakfast until 8 or 9, great. If that works for you and your lifestyle, that can be a healthy choice. But I don't want to recommend, oh, you really need to restrict your eating to this time period, because for a lot of people, it just doesn't work. I think of myself, working and having 3 kids, trying to do time restricted feeding, that means I'm not sitting down to a meal with my family. And so I think having that fasting that works for you and your lifestyle, keeping in mind that to me, eating is an enjoyment in life. Eating is to be savored with friends and family. And I think that rigidity and restriction has no place in a healthy, holistic lifestyle.
You have to be reasonable. You have to be flexible. I think, me and my wife have a very regimen between Monday through Friday, but on the weekend, our boys come home. We are more flexible. We eat different things. So because this is what you gain out of that interaction is a lot more than worry about calories and all of that. Yeah, you have to be sort of bend the rules at the time you can. But as long as I tell my patient, as long as you do 5-6 days of healthy lifestyle, one day it's a Scooby snack. One day you have to you got to add flavor to your life. If you want to go out one day a week, and is that okay? Just this is a part of enjoyment of the life, and pleasure and happiness is one of the key keys to longevity.
Exactly. And what I always like to say is we can commit to consistency without rigidity. So I can commit to trying to do all of these things. So going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time, getting my 7 to 9 hours of sleep, waking up in the morning, doing my meditation, getting my exercise, eating most of my meals earlier in the day, not late at night, getting all of those things in, and then being able to say yes. And you know what? When my kids come home and it's the holiday time, I'm going to enjoy this time, and I'm not going to be so rigid that I can't be flexible and enjoy what we want to enjoy as a family. I can commit to my consistent lifestyle, 99% of the time, or whatever, 90% of the time, but being able to be flexible, because I think we can get a little too restrictive and rigid. And there's something called orthorexia, where people just get so caught up on what is the right thing to eat that it becomes an eating disorder, trying to eat perfectly in this way. And I think that's counterproductive, because that adds stress.
And actually, I see quite that in my practice. There's a few percent of my patients, they're getting osteoporosis, other things, because of over dieting. They look at the diet so strictly. So I want to look at them and says, have fun with this, at least, open it up. Or they sometimes socially, they think if they're completely vegan or gluten-free, for example, we see so many people, gluten sensitivity, but they just, I don't know whether they want to be accepted to that society. 1% of Americans, they have celiac disease, but 25% are gluten-free diet. And that diet is not for everybody. It's good. Of course, you have to choose your gluten, smartly, how to cook it, how to raise, but it is some, as a part of people, I see it's, 80% it's really bad and reflux and all that. But I see a quarter of my patient that they worry about every single thing, every chemicals, organic and all of that. And then consequently, I see more and more malnutrition in those, and particularly we see in female with osteoporosis, and they don't believe they just don't eat this because, this causes osteoporosis. But anyway, so yeah, you have to be balanced, you have to enjoy it and do that. So all of this now to stress, we have discussed that. So this brings us to the sort of the whole diet, exercise, sleep to stress. So your thoughts on stress with all of these things, comments on that.
So the stress management class that I teach is an 8-week class. It's about 2 hours a week. And we really dive into our stress response. And so one of the first things that we do in the class is we really take stock of how we charge our battery and what drains our battery. And these are the things that we've been talking about. So those things that help me start my day so that I'm fully charged and I'm going to be able to handle whatever comes in the door, versus sometimes we can start the day great, but then our battery is fully charged. And then throughout the day, all these things happen, these little things happen, and our battery just gets drained, so that at the end of the day, our ability to manage whatever sort of situation all of a sudden just falls apart. So something that we can manage very well when our battery is full, we're fully charged, we're not going to handle the same when we are depleted. And so one of the first things we do is we take inventory, and we become very mindful about, how do I intentionally charge my battery? What do I do so that I can handle whatever life brings me? And those are a lot of the things we just talked about: sleep, social connections, physical activity, avoiding risky substances, physical activity, and nutrition. So those things often build our resilience. But then we also think about those things in our life, for instance, having fun, playing racquetball, riding horses, doing whatever it is that we love, that we can get fully immersed in. We're fully engaged. We're in that flow state. So that can be playing music. It can be listening to music. Creative outlets are a huge driver of charging our batteries. So whatever it is, it can be crafting, it can be fishing, it can be hunting, it can be whatever it is that charges you. And knowing that those things are important. And a lot of times I think that we undervalue the importance of having fun and engaging in creative activities. And so that's one of the first things we do is we really think about what charges me and how can I intentionally charge each day.
Dr. B, could you talk a little bit more about your program for stress management? I believe it's called the SMART program.
Yes. So SMART stands for Stress Management and Resiliency Training. And the program was created at the Benson Henry Institute for Mind Body Medicine at Massachusetts General Hospital. And it's been used for decades across the globe. And I love the program because it talks about stress management and all the ways that we can manage the stress in our life with practical tools that we learn strategies and skills along the way. And it also incorporates the pillars of lifestyle medicine. So every week we set goals in nutrition, physical activity, sleep, social connections, and pro-social behavior, because we know that, like we just talked about, all of those things help build our resilience, help us manage our stress better so that we can be our best self.
Who do you think is a good candidate for this type of program? And does it have to be in person? Can it be done virtually?
So I think anybody is a good candidate for it. So I went through the course before I started teaching it. And then now that I teach the course, I'll do it 3-4 times a year. And I get something out of it every single time, because every single time I teach the course, something different is happening in my life. And I'm always trying to learn how I can grow from stress as opposed to becoming distressed and getting stuck in the stress response. So I think anybody is a good candidate for it, even if you feel like, oh, I'm retired, I don't have any stress in my life anymore. And it's actually not true. So just because you're not in the workforce anymore doesn't mean that your stressors have gone away. So I think anybody is a good candidate. I think especially if you are dealing with health problems that are related to stress, it can be really, really vital to your overall health and recovery from what you're going through. It can be in person. So I'm offering it in person at Strata Integrated Wellness. So that is over at Garden of the Gods Resort and Club. The next course actually starts April 2nd. And so if you want to sign up for it, you can certainly call Strata and sign up for that course. And then I do offer it virtually. I used to only offer it virtually and I had regular times. Now I will offer it virtually to anyone who wants to get a group of people, of at least 6 people together, and find a time and date that works for you. And then I can do that virtually for whichever group wants to do it.
What about individual? If somebody wants one-to-one step, can do that as well?
Yes. So I have done it individually for some people who either they have a crazy travel schedule and they just can't make regular group times. So we can do it individually for that. And then also sometimes people just have very unique situations that they have a lot to work through with the stressors in their life. And so they just do better doing it on an individual basis.
Can you go to some of the steps, for example, from A to Z, how step just sort of an introductory, how you go step by step, you go through this program?
So the program is organized so that every week we do a stress awareness exercise. So we gain insight into our stressors, and I'll talk more about that. Every week we do a different relaxation response. So we learn a new way to counter the stress response. And so that includes focused attention meditation, open monitoring meditation, body scans, insight imagery, things like this, moving meditation, mindful exercises, including mindful eating. So we do a lot of different exercises each week, because you want to have more than one tool in your tool belt. Because one type of meditation is going to really serve you well on one day, and a different type of meditation may serve you well on a different day. And then every week we also learn and practice adaptive strategies to move forward. So it's not just about recognizing what's causing me stress. It's actually working through, how do I counter this stress response and how do I move forward with an adaptive strategy? And so the first week we start out with that, like I talked about, the energy battery. And so we really take inventory of what charges my battery, what drains my battery, because then I recognize that when my battery is fully charged, I handle the stressors in my life much better. So how do I charge my battery each day? How do I keep my battery charged so that I can be my best? I can show up and do the best that I can do. And the next step that we do is for a stress awareness exercise is we really dive into what is my stress response? Because so many of us, we're just so busy in our days, just doing. We don't even recognize what happens to me when I'm stressed. What are my physical stress reactions? Oh, maybe that's why my jaw is tight and I'm having headaches because I'm clenching my jaw. Oh, that's why I'm actually having this globus sensation. My throat feels tight because I'm stressed, or whatever it is, whether it's chest pain, chest tightness, breathing problems. Bowel issues are huge. So if we think about irritable bowel syndrome, and when people have symptoms, being able to recognize, oh, when I'm having these symptoms, I need to recognize that there's something going on. So it's gaining some insight into that, because sometimes people aren't even aware that their shoulder and neck pain is related to their stress. Cognitive processes where we get stuck in negative thinking. And again, sometimes it just seems natural for us to get stuck in these negative thought processes that get very distorted, and we go downhill and we don't even recognize that I do that more when I'm stressed. And then emotional responses, behavioral responses. What do I do? What are my behaviors that I engage in when I'm really stressed? And then interrelational. So how do I interact with other people when I'm stressed? And then we start to take a look at that. And then you start to recognize, oh, when I'm stressed, I come home and I isolate and I avoid eye contact and I get obsessive about cleaning, or I do this or I do that, whatever it is. And then you start to recognize that. And then when you recognize it, then you can pull in what we call little minis, where we can recognize what's going on and we can do just a little 30-second to 3-minute intervention to try to get us out of that. So that's a big part of what we do. We also have something that it's called the coping log. And the coping log is so helpful, because what happens when like, let's say that I have a stressful situation and I don't deal with that stressful situation at the time because I'm busy and I'm just keep going in my life and I go. But that situation keeps coming back to me. And so when I'm driving down the road, I think about that situation and I start spinning on that situation. I start ruminate about what I should have, could have done and what I wish I would have said. And then I start spinning on how that's going to affect the future. And then what happens is I have all these thoughts and I'm spinning on. And all of a sudden I find myself driving down the road and I'm clenching the steering wheel. My shoulders are up here. My jaw is tight. My chest is tight. My stomach is upset. And so it's being able to take that situation and we take it and we break it down. So we break it down to, okay, what happened? What are the facts of the situation? And then we take a look at, okay, what was my stress response? What did I do at the time? What am I experiencing now? We break down our thoughts. So what are my thoughts that are going through my head right now? And then I start recognizing, what are my negative automatic thoughts? How are those thoughts becoming distorted? We go through thought distortions. And then we take some time to do a relaxation response. And what happens then is we calm our body, we open up our frontal lobe, our executive function, and then we come back and we try to look at the situation with a different perspective. And we go through a list of questions. Okay, is my perspective on this accurate? What's the evidence that it's accurate? If I'm afraid something's going to happen, how do I know it will happen? Okay, if it does happen, can I handle it? Is there another way to look at the situation? And then we break it down even more. And so then we start to say, okay, in this situation, is there a problem? Is this my problem to solve? And if it's not my problem to solve, then what can I do in this situation to make the situation better? And if it's not my problem to solve, how can I achieve acceptance in this? Because there's a lot of things in our life that cause us stress that we feel like we're not in control and we don't have the resources to manage. And so that's when we have to step back and we have to say, okay, if I'm not in control of this situation, what can I control? And what do I need to accept? And then we have to achieve acceptance. And then we have to do what the best we can with what we can control. And then that's where we focus on what resources do I have. And so then we think about our internal and our external resources. Internal resources are my personal character strengths and virtues that are going to help me manage this situation the best that I can. What are my internal resources? What are my external resources? Who in my life can help me with this? Where can I, what education, experience, opportunities do I have that can help me cope with this situation? And so we break it down. So we take a situation that maybe we've been spinning on for years, because every time we think about that situation, we keep going to that negative place in our mind that's never going to change, but it just causes us stress. And we break it down so that we can come out of it with an adaptive strategy. We're not going to change a situation. And the situation, maybe the situation was bad and we were wronged and it was awful, but we don't want to be stuck in that, because it feels really yucky to be stuck in that stress response where we're just spinning on how I was wrong and this was terrible. And yeah, because you know what? Sometimes things don't go well in life. And sometimes it's not our fault. But we don't want to get stuck there. And so it's being able to accept, yes, this happened, and this is how I'm moving forward. So I think sometimes I'm a very visual person, and I imagine being stuck in this stress response where I am a car and I'm just stuck in the mud and I'm spinning my wheels and I'm not getting anywhere, but everything's getting really dirty, because the more I spin my wheels, the more mud goes everywhere. And it's just a messy mess. And I'm stuck, and I don't want to be stuck. And so the coping log helps us get unstuck from that stress response. And I think it's a beautiful tool to use. And it's something that the more we practice it, it just becomes so automatic that we do this over and over again, so that in the next time this situation happens, we can immediately start moving into recognizing negative automatic thoughts, recognizing how they're distorted, finding new perspective, and moving forward with adaptive strategy. And it just becomes the natural process of what we do.
This is so amazing, and you're amazing. I just pick up little pearls of wisdom here every few seconds. It's incredible. Could you briefly comment on your work in the schools? Because I know that's something that you're really passionate about.
Yes. So there is a nonprofit in town, and it's called the Mindfulness and Positivity Project. And it's a nonprofit that was started by 2 teachers and a mental health provider in District 12. And they started the program in response to a series of completed and attempted suicides at Cheyenne Mountain High School. So we know the mental health of our youth right now is really struggling. And so they started this program to try to help students. And what they discovered was that we can use some of these tools that we've talked about, mindfulness and positive psychology tools. We can use those to help students, but in trying to reach the most number of students, it helps to reach teachers. And so the Mindfulness and Positivity Project works with students, but also works with teachers throughout the Pikes Peak region. And by teaching teachers these strategies, they're able to not only be better teachers themselves in the classroom, but then they're able to model some of these behaviors for their students, and they're able to teach some of these strategies to their students. So anywhere from grade school to high school, and it can be really life-changing for a lot of these students. So it's the Mindfulness and Positivity Project. So if you want to donate to somebody, they are a 501c3, and you can find them online.
Well, Sheila, well, thank you so much for doing this. And would you like to give a handoff for the listeners, how to find you? And
so my website is sbemd.com. So that's SBEEMD.com. And I am also at Strata Integrated Wellness Center with Guard of the Gods Resort and Club.
Beautiful.
Great. Well, thank you so much for doing this, and we have a few meditations here coming up in the next episode. So thank you for sticking around to help us with those, and we'll look forward to doing that here in a few minutes.
Thank you. I greatly appreciate it.